You've probably heard of Pandora's box, right? But what if I told you the story you know isn't the real one, and that there's a dark truth behind the gods and their vengeances that they would rather you never knew? Get ready for an epic journey where we will reveal hidden secrets, the gods' mistakes, and the forgotten history behind Pandora's box. Something so powerful that it could change the way you see the mythological world. Stick with us until the end and discover everything they've tried to hide. You will be amazed. After the gods defeated the Titans and took control of the world, there arose the need to fill it with life. For this, Zeus tasked two Titan brothers with the mission, Epimetheus and Prometheus, sons of Iapetus. Epimetheus, impulsive and eager, decided to start by creating the animals. With great enthusiasm, he shaped creatures of all kinds, lions with sharp claws, birds that could cut through the sky with their wings, fish that moved gracefully through the waters. With each animal, he granted a special ability: speed, strength, poison, claws, and tough hooves. When he was finally done, he admired his work and smiled with satisfaction. But then, looking at Prometheus, he realized he had made a mistake. He had used up all the gifts on the animals and had nothing left for humans. Prometheus, unlike his brother, was patient and careful. He wanted to create something special, a being that wouldn't rely on claws or fangs to survive, but rather on intelligence itself. So he molded the first humans from clay, and with Athena's help, he gave them the breath of life. Humanity was born fragile. They had no fur to withstand the cold, no claws to defend themselves from predators. They didn't run as fast as deer or fly like eagles. All they had was their mind to think, invent, and overcome challenges. But while the animals thrived with their natural talents, humans suffered. They shivered in the cold nights, hid from the beasts, and barely managed to sustain themselves. Prometheus watched them, feeling a pang in his heart. He knew his creation had the potential for much more. They just needed something that would change their destiny forever. The first humans lived in a world where everything seemed in balance. Rivers flowed clear, the fields were fertile, and the trees offered sweet fruits in abundance. They didn't know hunger as the land provided everything they needed. They didn't know disease as their bodies were strong and pure. They didn't know war as their hearts had not yet been corrupted by hatred or envy. By day, they walked under the golden sunlight, marveling at the mountains, forests, and oceans. They learned to recognize the footprints of animals, to listen to the sound of the wind, and to understand the cycle of the seasons. The nights were silent and starry, and they slept without fear, for they didn't yet know what danger was. But as peaceful as their existence was, there was something that made them fragile. While animals had natural instincts to hunt, hide, and survive, humans were defenseless. Winter came, and the cold punished their bare skin. The beasts prowled in the darkness, and they had no way to protect themselves other than hiding in caves. The rain and wind soaked them, leaving them shivering. They tried to adapt. They dressed in leaves and animal hides, learned to use stones to cut, but these efforts were limited. Something was still missing, something that would separate them from the beasts and make them truly superior. Prometheus watched all this in silence. He saw his creations trying to understand the world around them, trying to stay warm, trying to survive. And deep in his heart, he felt a restlessness. He knew humans were different from all other creatures. They had skillful hands to create, curious minds to learn, and hearts that longed for something greater. But without a special gift, without a tool that would allow them to master nature instead of merely enduring it, they would never reach their true potential. And then Prometheus was certain of what he needed to do. But for that, he would have to defy Zeus. Prometheus could no longer ignore the suffering of the humans. Every night he saw his creations huddling against the cold, unable to see in the darkness, terrified of the glowing eyes of hidden predators. By day, he watched their frustrated attempts to create tools or cook the tough meat they chewed with difficulty. It was as if something inside them was begging for more, but without the key to this growth, they would be trapped in fragility forever. He knew what was missing: fire. With fire, humans could warm themselves, light the darkness, cook food, harden tools, and most importantly, learn to shape the world to their advantage. But fire was sacred, a gift exclusive to the gods. No mortal could touch it without incurring Zeus's wrath. Even so, Prometheus didn't hesitate. On a moonless night, when the gods were distracted with a great feast on Mount Olympus, he quietly made his way to Hephaestus's forge, the god of the blacksmith. There the flames burned intensely, fed by the heart of the earth itself. Every spark that danced in the air was a promise of creation, transformation, and power. Prometheus approached the brazier and, with steady hands, took a long stalk of fennel. He knew this hollow plant would hold the heat without being consumed too quickly. With a swift movement, he leaned the stalk over the flames and watched as the fire clung to it, alive and burning, as if it too wished to change humanity's fate. With the flame carefully protected, he descended from the god's dwelling and ran back to the land of humans. His heart was pounding, not out of fear, but excitement. He knew this would change everything. When he arrived, he found his children stumbling in the darkness. Without saying a word, he raised the flaming stalk before them. The shadows danced on their surprised faces. Their eyes reflected the fire's glow, as if they were seeing something divine, and in a way they were. A man hesitantly reached out his hand. The warmth enveloped his fingers, but it didn't hurt him. Soon, another did the same, and then another, until all were gathered around the flickering light. Prometheus taught them to feed the flames, to keep them alive, to use them to light the night and scare off predators. And then something incredible happened. For the first time, humanity was no longer just a part of nature. They were dominating it. But high on Mount Olympus, Zeus noticed something strange. There was an unusual glow in the darkness of the earth, a flame where there shouldn't be one. And upon understanding what had happened, his fury was immediate. Prometheus had committed the greatest act of betrayal against the gods, and Zeus would never let this go unpunished. From high on Olympus, Zeus looked down on the mortal world with his divine vision. Every night he saw only the darkness spreading across the land, interrupted only by the distant glow of the stars and the moon. But that night, something was different. Small points of light flickered in various places, like fireflies scattered across the earth. His gaze narrowed. He stood up abruptly from his throne, and the sky trembled. Lightning split the clouds, and the winds roared as if they shared in his fury. There was no doubt. Someone had stolen the sacred fire and given it to mortals. The gods interrupted their feasting as they sensed the wrath of their king. Hermes, ever watchful, was the first to understand the cause of the impending storm. "This can only be the work of Prometheus," he murmured, looking at his father. The mere mention of the Titans' name made the thunder roar even louder. Zeus clenched his fists, his expression a mix of rage and contempt. "He dared defy my will, give mortals what rightfully belongs to us." His voice echoed, shaking the palace's columns. Hera, who had been watching it all with a veiled smile, approached her husband and gently touched his arm. "Humans won't know how to control this power," she said, a cunning gleam in her eyes. "They'll challenge the gods, think they can be like us." Zeus took a deep breath, trying to contain the outburst of fury that threatened to bring Olympus itself to the ground. "Prometheus will pay dearly for his insolence," he decreed. "But not just him. The humans will learn that there is a price for their boldness." He then called Hephaestus, the god of the forge, and ordered him to create unbreakable chains. Next, he summoned his giant eagle, a creature feared even by the gods themselves. But that wasn't enough. The punishment for humans also had to be Cruel, a precise blow that would teach them never to defy Olympus again. Zeus knew exactly what he would do. As the storm raged in the skies, the fate of Prometheus and humanity was sealed. When Zeus's wrath fell upon someone, there was no escape. Prometheus knew that his act of rebellion would not go unnoticed, but he accepted the risk without hesitation. He would rather suffer alone than see humanity condemned to ignorance. And Zeus made sure his punishment was severe. He ordered Hephaestus to forge chains made from the world's toughest metal, impossible to break. Then he sent Hermes and a group of lesser gods to capture Prometheus. The Titan didn't resist, not because he couldn't fight, but because he knew his punishment was inevitable. He was taken to a remote mountain where the sky met the clouds, a place where no one could help him. "You defied the order of the gods," Zeus thundered, his voice echoing through the valley. "Now you will feel the weight of eternity on your flesh." The gods chained Prometheus to a cliff. His arms, stretched and bound to the hard rock, he couldn't move or defend himself. Then Zeus called his colossal eagle, a beast with sharp talons and cruel eyes. "Every day," Zeus declared, "this creature will feed on your liver, and because you are immortal, your flesh will regenerate each night. Your pain will never end." The eagle took flight, spinning in the air before diving toward Prometheus. Its talons tore at his skin, and its beak pierced his flesh. The pain was unbearable, but the Titan did not scream. He knew Zeus wanted to see him beg, wanted him to repent. But Prometheus simply closed his eyes and endured the torment. Day after day, the scene repeated. Each morning, the eagle returned to devour his liver, and at night, his flesh regenerated only to be torn apart again. In Olympus, the gods watched the punishment with a mix of respect and fear. Prometheus had defied Zeus in a way no one had ever dared, and now he was paying the price. But even chained, even feeling the pain of every strike from the eagle, Prometheus didn't regret it, because down below in the mortal world, humanity thrived. They had fire, and with it, the power to change their destiny. Zeus could punish him for eternity, but he couldn't extinguish the flame now burning in human hearts. Zeus, sitting on his golden throne, was still not satisfied. Punishing Prometheus was only half of his revenge. He wanted humanity itself to suffer the consequences of accepting the forbidden gift. If humans had received fire, then they would also receive something that would teach them they couldn't defy the gods without paying a high price. Then, he had an idea. If Prometheus gave something to humans, then we will give them something as well, Zeus declared with a cold smile. But not a gift to help them, rather one that will lead them to ruin. He summoned Hephaestus, the great divine craftsman, and ordered him to mold the most beautiful of creatures. Unlike the men created by Prometheus, this new creation would have a more delicate and graceful form. Hephaestus worked with dedication, sculpting her from clay and breathing life into her with his own breath. Her body was perfect, her skin shining like polished marble, and her eyes reflected the light of the heavens. She was the first woman. Her name would be Pandora. But Zeus wasn't just interested in beauty. He wanted Pandora to be irresistible, to enchant the mortals and lead them to ruin without them realizing it. So he called upon the other gods to bestow upon her gifts that would make her even more special. When Hephaestus finished his work, Pandora opened her eyes, and at that moment, the fate of humanity began to change forever. As soon as Pandora awoke, she opened her eyes to a dazzling and unknown world. Every detail around her seemed like a dream. The marble halls of Olympus, the golden glow of the sun reflected on the clouds, and the gods watching her with enigmatic gazes. Zeus smiled with satisfaction. His creation was perfect, but something was still missing. To fulfill her, Purpose, he declared. Pandora will receive gifts from each of us. The gods approached one by one, granting her gifts that would make her unique. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, touched her hair and whispered, "You will have the most enchanting appearance that has ever existed. No mortal will be able to resist your gaze, and all will long to be by your side." Athena, goddess of wisdom and the arts, gave her manual dexterity and intelligence, teaching her how to weave, sculpt, and shape anything she desired with her hands. Apollo, the god of music and poetry, gifted her with a melodious voice that would captivate those who heard her sing. Hermes, the messenger of the gods, granted her eloquence and persuasion, so that her words would be as sweet as honey, but as dangerous as poison. Demeter taught her how to cultivate the earth, making her skilled in planting and harvesting. The gods gave her gifts that made her fascinating, almost divine. But then Hera, the queen of Olympus, approached. Her gaze was calculating, and her words were wrapped in a treacherous sweetness. "I grant you curiosity," she said, with a smile that only Zeus fully understood. Pandora felt a shiver run down her spine. What was so special about this gift? She didn't know, but this would be the gift that defined her fate and humanity's. Finally, Zeus raised his hand and declared, "Now Pandora is complete." She would be the perfect instrument for his revenge, and his next gift would seal the fate of mankind. With Pandora now complete in her beauty and abilities, Zeus knew he was about to carry out his final revenge against mortals. But he wanted more. He wanted to ensure that Pandora would be the key to his punishment, that she would be the cause of suffering without mortals understanding why. So Zeus did something different, something he knew would be irresistible to the young woman. He gave her a box, but not just any box. This was a mysterious box, made of polished gold, with intricate designs that seemed to change shape as you looked at it. It was heavy, but Pandora couldn't resist the urge to touch it, as if the box was calling to her. Zeus looked into Pandora's eyes and said firmly, "This box contains something that must not be seen or touched. Never open it. No mortal may know what's inside." Pandora, despite her growing curiosity, listened to Zeus's words with a mix of respect and apprehension. The power of the gods was immense, and she knew her task was to obey Zeus's commands. But something inside her, perhaps the curiosity granted by Hera, began to grow. The box seemed to whisper to her, as if there was something inside that was essential to understanding her purpose in the world. Zeus, noticing the doubt in Pandora's eyes, tried to give her one last warning, but something in his expression revealed a secret he didn't want her to discover. He knew she would eventually give in to temptation. "Remember, Pandora," he said in a softer voice, almost paternal, "the fate of humanity is in your hands." And with that, he left her, disappearing on the horizon of Olympus, while Pandora, alone and with a weight on her heart, gazed at the box that now dominated her thoughts. Despite the weight of her mission and the mystery surrounding the box, Pandora tried to adjust to life on Earth. She was taken to Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother, to be his wife. Epimetheus was a good man, but often lacking in vision, which contrasted with his wife, who seemed to carry an endless curiosity and sharp intelligence despite being newly created. She dedicated herself to learning and adapting to the new world around her. Her beauty, however, was the first thing everyone noticed upon seeing her, and this drew admiring glances, but also caused discomfort as people realized she was unlike the others. Over time, Pandora and Epimetheus began to truly fall in love. Though he was naive and didn't fully understand the gods' designs, he knew that Pandora was special, something beyond what he could comprehend. He saw her as a woman worthy of love and respect, and together they formed a peaceful and harmonious life. Pandora, for her part, felt that her curiosity was consuming her. She loved Epimetheus, but Zeus's box was still there, a constant presence, in her mind. Every time she looked at it, something inside her stirred. Her days were filled with love for her husband, but at night, alone, the box seemed to call her, as if it contained a secret she had to uncover. Epimetheus, though loving and protective, didn't understand the weight Pandora carried. He knew her only as his wife, his life partner, but he didn't realize that she was hiding a constant internal struggle. Her curiosity grew with each passing day, like a shadow that couldn't be shaken off. And so, the days passed peacefully, but with the sense that something great was about to happen, something that would forever change the course of their lives and of humanity. Pandora could no longer control the thoughts that haunted her. The box, always there, so carefully guarded by Zeus, was a presence that seemed to grow inside her, like a flame that only intensified as she got closer to it. During the early days of her life with Epimetheus, she tried to ignore it, focusing on her daily tasks and the love she felt for her husband. But the curious, anxious glances she cast toward the box in her moments of solitude became harder and harder to hide. There was something irresistible about it. Every day, Pandora felt an increasing need to know what was inside. Why would the gods impose such a mystery? Why would Zeus, in his wisdom and power, do something so cruel, give her so many gifts and yet warn her about this box? Epimetheus, always distracted and kind, didn't notice Pandora's inner torment. He was busy with his own tasks, fully trusting her. To him, their life seemed complete and peaceful, and he couldn't see what troubled his beloved. The trust he placed in her only increased the pressure Pandora felt. She knew she couldn't betray his trust, but at the same time, her curiosity was like an uncontrollable force, calling to her relentlessly. On one particularly calm day, when Epimetheus was away, Pandora could resist no longer. She looked around, making sure she was alone, and then, with trembling hands, approached the box. Its weight was almost imperceptible, but the sound of the metal when touched made her heart race. Pandora hesitated for a moment, one last wave of reason trying to dominate her will, but curiosity was stronger. With a final sigh, she opened the box. When Pandora finally lifted the lid of the box, the world around her seemed to stop for a moment. The darkness that emerged from within the box was thick, almost tangible, like a shadow quickly spreading, swallowing the space around her. At first, nothing happened. Pandora froze, staring into the box's interior, as if waiting for something, as if fearing the worst was yet to come. But then, the evil Zeus had so carefully sealed away began to spread. From the depths of the box, plagues and diseases began to emerge, like dark ghosts floating in the air, vanishing into the shadows of the earth. Famine materialized, accompanied by a cold chill that made Pandora's body tremble. Wars and destruction spread like black clouds, bringing despair, resentment, and pain. The world seemed to crumble as the evils unleashed by the box came to life. Pandora felt an unbearable pressure in her chest, a guilt that crushed her. She had unleashed all the evils upon humanity, and there was no turning back. Each evil that emerged was a direct reflection of her action, and the weight of what she had done became increasingly intolerable. Then, amidst the chaos forming around her, Pandora realized that something still remained in the box. She didn't know what it was, but a faint light glimmered at the bottom. It was weak but distinct. It was the last thing left, like a final hope lost in the midst of darkness. Desperate to right her wrong, Pandora tried to close the box quickly, but it was too late. The evils were out and had spread across the world, but in the bottom of the box only one glimmer remained. Hope. This light, still small but steady, was all that remained. Pandora didn't know how to interpret it, but she felt that it still possessed a strange power, perhaps the only power that could save humanity from its own destruction. And while evil consumed the world, hope remained silent in the box, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. After the chaos Pandora had released by opening the box, the world seemed to drown in suffering. Diseases and pain spread uncontrollably. Humans became selfish and violent, and the fear of destruction hung in the air like an immense shadow. Wars grew to terrible proportions, famine ravaged the lands, and envy gnawed at people's hearts. Everything seemed lost. Pandora, devastated by what she had caused, withdrew to a secluded corner of her home, not knowing how to fix the irreparable mistake she had made. She cried, blaming herself for every tear that fell from the sky, for every life that was destroyed. The suffering of the people, now intensified, seemed to reflect her own pain. It was then that she remembered the last thing she had seen in the box: hope. Though it was a small glimmer, a faint light at the bottom of the box, it had not disappeared like the other evils. Pandora didn't know what it meant, but something told her that somehow this hope was something fundamental, even if invisible to those immersed in chaos. As the world shattered around her, Pandora, in a moment of reflection, began to understand. Perhaps hope was the key to restoring the lost balance. She didn't know if hope could heal the deep wounds caused by the evils, but she knew that without it, everything would be lost forever. Hope was something silent, something that could persist, even in the most desperate circumstances. It was a promise that despite the pain, suffering could someday lessen, and that was what Pandora tried to pass on to humanity. That even amid destruction, something could still be found, something that could inspire resistance against sadness and pain. Pandora didn't have the power to undo what had happened, but now she knew that at least humanity would have something to fight for. Something that, though invisible, could be the last salvation in a devastated world. And so, while the evils of the world spread, hope still remained, like a fragile flame, waiting to be embraced, waiting to bring strength to the hearts of those who, despite everything, refused to succumb completely to the darkness. As the world consumed itself in its own flames, humanity found itself facing a paradox. Hope, which Pandora had released when she opened the box, was a faint flame on the horizon, but at the same time, it seemed to carry an immense weight. People began to question its true nature. Was it a gift, or, on the contrary, a curse in disguise? Philosophers and sages, amid the widespread suffering, began to discuss the meaning of hope. Some saw it as the last remaining virtue of humanity, something everyone could cling to, even in the most desperate conditions. It was the last force capable of inspiring people to move forward, despite the evils now ruling the world. For them, hope was vital, like a spark on a starless night, something that could give men the courage they needed to resist and fight against the evils that had spread. On the other hand, others viewed hope with skepticism. They argued that hope was in fact the greatest source of suffering. Hope, they said, kept people trapped in false expectations, making them believe that pain and misery had an imminent end. But in reality, hope merely prolonged suffering, keeping everyone waiting for something that might never come. The pain of not seeing the truth and the constant expectation of a better future without a guarantee that it would come became a burden for many. The tension between these viewpoints spread across all regions. Some people, despite all the adversities, clung to hope, believing it was the only thing left to sustain their broken hearts. They continued to fight, convinced that one day the light would shine again. But there were also those who, disillusioned, saw hope as an illusion, a distraction that prevented them from accepting the harsh reality of a ruined world. Among the philosophers, the question was clear. Hope, as a virtue, could be both a force for perseverance and a dangerous illusion. For some, It was the last reserve of human dignity, a beacon guiding lost souls. For others, it was the invisible prison that condemned humanity to live in constant expectation, never reaching the relief they so desperately sought. In the end, although men didn't know exactly what to do with hope, one thing was indisputable. It was there, in plain sight, even though its true nature was an enigma no one could fully decipher. As time passed, the evils unleashed from the box began to spread like an immense plague, leaving deep marks on the heart of humanity. The world that once knew an illusory peace now sank into decay. Diseases that men had never imagined appeared, with overwhelming force, causing thousands to succumb mercilessly. Epidemics swept through cities, and fear became a constant companion in every journey, every thought. Famine took on uncontrollable proportions. Fields that had once been fertile were now dry, and the scarcity of food made hearts more selfish and eyes more cruel. Disputes over scarce resources became frequent and violent, and solidarity was replaced by brutality. Ancient bonds of friendship and brotherhood were shattered, and people turned against each other in a desperate fight for survival. Wars, once occasional, became a constant. Hatred among men grew exponentially, fueled by envy and bitterness. Nations faced each other with ruthless brutality, and the battlefield was now fueled by an insane fury that seemed endless. Zeus, watching the growing chaos, took a dark pleasure in knowing that his revenge was being fulfilled. Humanity, which he had so carefully created, was now lost in its own suffering. For him, this was the price mortals would pay for their disobedience. Prometheus's arrogance in defying the gods and offering fire to humans, the symbol of progress and intelligence, was now being expiated in a destroyed world. However, the guilt that took hold of human hearts was immense. Men were tormented, each one asking themselves how they had come to this point. The suffering they had caused others, the despair they had sowed, seemed unbearable. But there was something more in the air, something that could not be ignored: the hope. Despite all the tragedies unfolding before them, some still carried the faint flame of hope in their hearts. They believed that no matter how dark reality was, there could still be a chance for redemption. But for many, that hope seemed like a mere mirage, an illusion that only prolonged the suffering. The eternal struggle between light and shadows, between hope and despair, grew ever more intense, and as the world shattered, what remained was the question everyone asked themselves: would there be an end to all this? Or was humanity, with its own mistakes, destined to live forever in the abyss it had created? Even amid the world's destruction, the cycle of life continued. Epimetheus and Pandora, though afflicted by the pain of what they had caused, had found refuge in the love they shared. Amid the tragedy, a new beginning arose for them, a daughter whom they named Pyrrha. She was a child different from all others, not only because of her divine heritage, but by the strength of her spirit. Pyrrha grew up in a devastated world where traces of destruction were everywhere, but her mind was clear and her intelligence was remarkable. As the daughter of Pandora and Epimetheus, she possessed a rare combination of divine abilities that made her unique. The gifts of the gods, passed to Pandora, now manifested powerfully in her. She was endowed with great wisdom, able to perceive details that escaped even the keenest eyes. Her skill was admirable, as if her hands were guided by almost supernatural precision. Pandora's beauty seemed to have been passed to her daughter, but with something more, something that attracted gazes, not because of the purity of form, but because of the depth of the soul it reflected. Yet despite all the gifts she carried, Pyrrha was a young introvert. Her spirit, though bright, was not swayed by the superficial joys of life. She observed the world with distant serenity, as if she were a spectator in the human tragedy, but never fully involved. It wasn't that she was indifferent. She simply didn't know how to connect truly with the chaos surrounding her. Her heart was closed, and her thoughts were often deeper than the words she spoke. Pandora, concerned, tried to reach her daughter in every possible way, but Pyrrha remained distant, immersed in her own questions. She saw the suffering around her and understood her parents' pain, but couldn't find a way to open up to others, nor find comfort in her own emotions. And while the world disintegrated into ruins and violence, Pyrrha continued to walk silently along the path of wisdom and introspection, unaware that destiny awaited her with challenges far greater than she had ever imagined. Her future, like the future of humanity, was at a crossroads. But until that moment, she had no awareness of how crucial she would become for the world's rebirth. The world continued to disintegrate around her, but for Pyrrha, something still seemed to pulse in the air, something she couldn't define, but felt in every movement, every whisper of the wind. A distant fate called her, and she knew she would be more than just a spectator in the tragedy of the world. The chaos and pain she had witnessed had awakened something inside her, something deep that she could not ignore. It was during a trip to Thessaly, where the name of a remarkable young man had drawn her attention, that Pyrrha met Deucalion. He was known as the son of Prometheus, the one who, even chained, still possessed divine wisdom. He was a man of great strength and courage, but also of a great heart. His actions were driven not only by reason, but by the desire to repair the wrongs caused by his lineage and to protect those who still believed in human goodness. The meeting between Pyrrha and Deucalion was like an awakening for both. Pyrrha, always reserved and introspective, found in Deucalion someone who understood the weight of the responsibility she carried. He had lived his life under the burden of his father Prometheus's destiny and knew what it meant to fight against the chains of fate, but at the same time he also carried the flame of hope, a mysterious force that seemed to never fade, no matter how strong the darkness around them. Deucalion, in turn, saw in Pyrrha not only Pandora's daughter, but someone who carried wisdom beyond her years. There was something in her eyes, a glimmer that for him was like a promise. She was not merely a spectator of the world's suffering, she was ready to act. He felt that their destinies were intertwined in a way that neither of them could fully comprehend. What started as a conversation soon became something deeper. A silent bond grew between them, and before long they realized they were in love, not only with each other's qualities, but with the need to rebuild what had been destroyed. Pyrrha, who had always felt so distant from the world, found in Deucalion a partner, someone with whom she could share her sorrows and her wisdom, and together create something new, something that could restore humanity. Together, they began to build a life seeking, through love and collaboration, to heal the wounds of the world. Pyrrha knew that the future was in their hands, but the weight of responsibility felt lighter when she was by Deucalion's side. She felt that by combining her strength with his, they could truly change the fate the gods had imposed, bringing true hope to the world. But as always, destiny was lurking. They didn't know that the greatest challenge was yet to come. As Pyrrha and Deucalion grew closer, nurturing a love that seemed to be the only pure thing in such a corrupted world, the rest of humanity continued to sink deeper into its own depravity. Hope, once released from Pandora's box, seemed to have transformed into something unrecognizable. Those who still believed in it saw themselves as exceptions, isolated in a sea of selfishness and cruelty. Human wickedness had taken on grotesque forms. People were obsessed with the endless pursuit of power and wealth, willing to betray, lie, and destroy anything in their path. The values that once upheld civilizations, loyalty, friendship, respect, were now nothing more than distant memories of the forgotten past. Each individual, in their reckless pursuit of survival or personal advantage, became more insensitive to the pain of others. Even Deucalion, son of Prometheus, who had always believed in the potential of humanity, began to question everything. He watched with sadness and despair as men and women in their greed destroyed everything they touched. He wondered how such a magnificent creation could have come to this point. Though the blood of the gods ran through his veins, he felt that humanity was lost, and the future seemed darker with each passing day. Pyrrha, on the other hand, reflected deeply on this state of things. She knew that human suffering wasn't something to be ignored, but the idea that humanity could be completely redeemed from its own wickedness made her doubt the true capacity for change. The introspective young demigoddess observed the despair, the wrong choices, and the tragedies around her, questioning whether there was, in fact, anything that could restore harmony. The gods, seeing the continued destruction of the world and the fall of humanity, no longer felt much pity for the creatures they had created. They watched with a certain detachment, indifferent to the pain of those now suffering the consequences of their own actions. Zeus, with his impassive expression, knew that humanity had become unrecognizable. He no longer saw a reason to protect them or intervene in their choices. However, while all of this was happening, an idea began to grow within Deucalion's heart. He knew that the only way to restore some balance to the world would be to find a way to destroy evil at its core. Not for revenge or punishment, but so that humanity could finally be reborn, so that it could have a real chance to start over. But would that even be possible? He knew that it would take more than strength or courage. He would need something deeper, something that only he and Pyrrha could discover together. And perhaps, in this union, in the pure heart of hope that they both carried, lay the answer to heal the broken world. The night was heavy, and the biting wind carried an omen of despair. Amid the chaos spreading across the world, Deucalion and Pyrrha continued their journey, unaware of the imminent threat. But destiny, always unpredictable, was preparing to reveal itself in an irreversible way. Prometheus, though chained to the rock and condemned to eternal suffering, never lost his ability to see the future. The gift of prophecy still lay in his hands, and in a moment of anguish, he reached out to his son. Lost in his thoughts and reflections, Deucalion had a clear vision of his father, whose words, though distant, struck his heart with immense force. "Deucalion," said Prometheus, with the gravity of one who had nothing left to lose, "destruction is coming, and it will be relentless. Zeus, in his fury, has decided that humans must perish. A flood will swallow everything, erasing what remains. The only chance of survival will be yours and Pyrrha's. Build a vessel, for the waters will spare nothing. There is no more time." Those words hit Deucalion like a lightning strike. For a moment he stood motionless, his mind trying to process his father's warning. But the reality was clear. What was coming wasn't just a calamity, but total extinction. Humanity, which he had still tried to save, was now condemned by the wrath of the gods. With a heavy heart, Deucalion ran to Pyrrha, who, as always, sensed the changes in the air, though she didn't know exactly what was coming. He told her everything he had heard, and the two stared at each other in deep silence, absorbing the weight of the truth. Prometheus's message was definitive. Destruction was near, and nothing could stop Zeus's will. "We must act immediately," said Deucalion, his voice firm but filled with tension. "The flood approaching will spare no one, but there is still a chance. We need to build a vessel that will allow us to survive." Pyrrha, though shaken, did not hesitate. She knew that humanity's future depended on this one action. It was the only chance to survive and perhaps rebuild what the gods had decided to destroy. Together they began working on the boat, collecting wood, tools, and any material that could help them face the storm approaching. They knew that, alone, they wouldn't be able to save everyone, but they needed to ensure that at least their hope would survive. And so, With the gaze of an uncertain future, Deucalion and Pyrrha prepared for the greatest trial of their lives, as Zeus' flood rapidly approached, ready to swallow everything they knew. The following days were marked by growing unease. The sky seemed to weigh down on the world, and the wind carried with it an omen of destruction. Deucalion and Pyrrha, immersed in the urgent task of building their vessel, felt the pressure of each passing moment. Prometheus's warning left no room for doubt. The flood was imminent, and with it, the destruction of everything they knew. The construction of the boat advanced slowly, but with the force of desperation guiding their hands. Deucalion, with his strength and determination, cut the wood and organized the pieces with precision. Pyrrha, with her sharp eyes and skilled hands, worked tirelessly, helping to secure each plank, each seam of the hull. They knew the boat needed to be strong enough to withstand the forces of nature that were about to be unleashed upon the land. However, as the couple battled against time, Olympus was preparing to fulfill Zeus's decision. The king of the gods, after consulting with the other gods, began executing his plan of destruction. He knew his anger couldn't be ignored, and with a gesture of his powerful hand, the clouds began to form and gather on the horizon. Suddenly the sky opened, and a torrent of water poured down in an overwhelming rush. The flood Zeus had commanded was not just a simple rain, it was a cataclysmic flood of immense proportions. The waters rose quickly, sweeping away everything. In their path, cities, fields, mountains, everything that was known was submerged. The sound of chaos was deafening, and humanity, already on the brink of collapse, now faced its total destruction. Deucalion and Pyrrha, with the boat finally ready, pushed it into the choppy sea, just as the waters began to swallow the world around them. The boat rocked on the rising waves, but they knew they had no choice. The storm roared around them, but the couple remained steadfast, their eyes focused on the uncertain horizon, hoping that at least the promise of a new beginning would be fulfilled. The flood seemed endless. The world was being erased, and the gods looked on from above without mercy, as the earth was engulfed by the waters. But in Deucalion and Pyrrha's hearts, a small flame of hope remained. They were the last, and over time, the solitude on the boat became even more evident as the world they knew disappeared. What remained for them now was to survive and wait for the moment when, after the waters had calmed, humanity's new cycle could begin. As the floodwaters took over the world, Zeus watched with an impassive gaze from his throne on Olympus. He felt a dark sense of triumph, as though he were finally putting an end to what had been corrupted by human errors. Total destruction seemed to be the only way to restore order, but even for a god like Zeus, the power of the compassion of the other gods could not be ignored. Among the gods, there were those who watched with sadness, their eyes filled with sorrow for humanity as it drowned in the waters, but who, at the same time, knew that it was the only way to rid the world of evil. Athena, with her wise heart, wished to save at least a part of humanity, or perhaps give mortals a second chance. But she knew that Zeus would not easily yield. Hermes, who had always been the messenger of Olympus, felt torn. Inside him, doubt grew. He had seen the potential in humans, especially in Pyrrha and Deucalion. The unfolding tragedy affected him, and he knew there was something deeply wrong in Zeus's fury. However, as a loyal servant of Olympus, he could not go against Zeus's will. The peace among the gods and the established order required respect for Zeus's authority, but the resistance did not only come from Hermes and Athena. As they observed the suffering of Deucalion and Pyrrha in their boat, the other gods began to question Zeus's decision. How could he destroy humanity's last hope? Those who, even amid tragedy, showed such purity and determination. There was something in them that resonated with the gods, a flame that should not be extinguished. In a secret meeting, Aphrodite, Apollo, and other gods gathered to intercede on behalf of the couple. They knew that despite Zeus's wrath, there was something bigger at stake, the future of the world which could lie in their hands. Apollo, with his divine vision, saw that Deucalion and Pyrrha had a crucial role to play, not only for themselves, but for all of humanity's future. When Zeus learned of the secret conversations among the gods, his fury grew. He would not tolerate disobedience and was ready to bring more destruction upon Deucalion and Pyrrha. However, before he could act, a miracle happened. Athena, with all her wisdom, suggested a way to save the couple without directly disobeying Zeus. She knew that Zeus, although furious, could not allow two such special mortals to be consumed by the fury of the seas. The gods' intervention was subtle. While the storm continued to ravage the world, a quiet change took place in the waters surrounding the boat. Poseidon, the god of the sea, heard the pleas of the other gods and decided to intervene in a discreet way. The waves around Deucalion and Pyrrha, which had been destructive and violent, began to calm. The waters, in a dance controlled by the sea god, began to recede, creating a safe path for the boat. Zeus's rage continued to roar, but the mercy of the gods was helping the couple escape the catastrophe. Realizing the interference of the other gods, Zeus felt his power being challenged, but the divine action was too subtle to be completely eradicated. Hesitant, Zeus allowed Deucalion and Pyrrha to survive, but not without constant vigilance. Destruction still ravaged the world, but they, somehow, were being spared. The winds began to calm, and Deucalion and Pyrrha's boat sailed for days, now floating on calmer seas, but still lost in a world bidding farewell to what once was. The mercy of the gods, though small, brought them a rare opportunity to survive and start anew. After days adrift, with no certain direction, Deucalion and Pyrrha's boat finally reached land that, though still marked by devastation, seemed to be the only safe refuge. The floodwaters had begun to recede, slowly exposing the tips of mountains and what remained of solid ground. As they looked around, Deucalion and Pyrrha saw a different world. Trees submerged, cities collapsed, and the landscape was a vision of desolation. Humanity had been virtually wiped out, leaving only ruins and distant memories. With the silent help of the gods guiding them subtly, the couple disembarked in a high area of Mount Etna, where, as promised by Zeus, their mission was clear: to repopulate the earth. They were alone, the last survivors of the human race. The responsibility was immense, and the weight of expectations hung over them like an almost impossible task. "Now, we must rebuild what was lost," Deucalion said, his voice firm but filled with uncertainty. The idea of being responsible for repopulating the world, of being the seed of a new beginning, seemed grand, but also frightening. He knew the new world would need more than just his and Pyrrha's presence. It would require faith, effort, and, above all, a renewed morality to avoid the mistakes that had led to the destruction of the previous humanity. Pyrrha, with her always attentive gaze and more calm demeanor in the situation, understood that their fate was intertwined with that of all who would come after them. But what could be rebuilt when everything around them seemed lost? She knew things wouldn't be easy, but she believed that a new opportunity could blossom from tragedy. The two began to search for traces of life, seeds they could plant, animals that remained to restart the cycle of life. Although the world was in ruins, the earth still possessed an immense regenerative power. The first plants began to sprout, and with them, hope was renewed. The small flowers that appeared amid the ashes carried with them a clear symbol: the resilience of life. In their journey, Deucalion and Pyrrha began to realize that they weren't as alone as they thought. As they explored the higher areas of the mountain, they heard soft sounds, almost as if the earth itself were communicating with them. Gradually, life began to return. Birds flew, fish swam back into the rivers, and other animals began to reappear in the forests. It was a slow process of renewal, and Deucalion and Pyrrha became the caretakers of this new phase of the world. When they finally began planting the seeds of humanity, Deucalion and Pyrrha knew they had to do more than just repopulate the earth. They had to teach the new generations about the mistakes of the past and the importance of living in harmony with the world and their fellow humans. In this way, with the first steps of reconstruction, the couple began to create a new era where the wisdom of Prometheus and the mercy of the gods would guide the future. What began as an act of survival became a symbol of hope. Deucalion and Pyrrha were not just survivors of the flood, but the founders of a new humanity, one that would learn from the lessons of the past and ensure that the waters of despair would never return. Deucalion and Pyrrha's return to land was not just the restoration of a new human race, but also the birth of stories that resonated through the ages. Though they were far from other cultures and tribes, what they represented spread in different forms, transforming into myths and teachings. Over time, their story became connected to narratives that crossed borders, cultures, and religions. In the Christian tradition, the idea of a flood that destroys humanity, leaving only a small family to survive and find refuge and renewal, echoes surprisingly with the story of Noah. Like Deucalion and Pyrrha, Noah, with the help of God, built an ark to save his family and the animals, preventing the end of all creation. The parallel between these two stories is clear. Both speak of a new beginning, a salvation that emerges after a period of catastrophic destruction, symbolizing hope in times of adversity. In Mesopotamian mythology, we find the Epic of Gilgamesh, where a great flood also arises as punishment from the gods. The story of Utnapishtim, who survives this cataclysm, closely resembles that of Deucalion and Pyrrha, as he, like them, is a survivor chosen by the gods to preserve human life. The analogy between these stories reinforces the universality of the flood myth and the idea of renewal after catastrophe, where humanity gets a second chance. Meanwhile, on Mount Olympus, Zeus and the other gods observed, with a certain detachment, the progress of Deucalion and Pyrrha. The regeneration of humanity wouldn't be simple, and although the suffering of the ancient humans had been necessary, the gods began to question the nature of their own role in the creation of mortal beings. Prometheus's sacrifice, Zeus's stubbornness, and the mistakes made, these all led to a cycle of destruction and renewal. Yet with Deucalion and Pyrrha's presence, a new possibility for the future seemed to take shape. For humans, the story of Deucalion and Pyrrha served as a reminder that, despite the difficulties and mistakes of the past, renewal was always possible. They learned that humanity could grow, evolve, and start over, not only due to circumstances, but also through their own determination and courage. However, the end of Deucalion and Pyrrha's story didn't mean the end of the creation cycle. The world continued to transform, new myths were forged, and new generations emerged, carrying with them the seeds of hope and the mistakes of the past. The lesson passed down from generation to generation was clear. The balance between gods and humans, between chaos and order, was fragile. But in every new story, in every new birth, the creation cycle continued, always seeking a lost balance, but never fully out of reach. The legacy of Deucalion and Pyrrha, like that of many heroes in mythology, would remain through the ages, inspiring, men to question their own destiny and always find a way to rebuild, even after the most devastating of destructions. Humanity, just like the earth, would always have the ability to be reborn. And so the cycle that began with the creation of Epimetheus and Prometheus passed through Zeus's punishments, Pandora's curiosity, the fury of the flood, and finally reached Deucalion and Pyrrha, would continue unfolding in the hearts of all mortals through every generation that rose in search of wisdom, justice, and above all, hope. Thus, we come to the end of this epic journey through the myths and legends that shaped humanity. The story of Deucalion, Pyrrha, and the gods of Olympus teaches us about the power of renewal, the mistakes of the past, and above all, the hope that always guides us. If you enjoyed this adventure and want to learn more about the stories that still influence the world today, don't forget to leave your comment, like the video, and of course subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss any updates and can keep exploring this vast universe of fascinating myths and stories with See you in the next video.